This is a story about putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. Small businesses were hit hard by the sweeping tariffs President Trump imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. So you'd think they breathed a big sigh of relief when the Supreme Court struck them down. But it turns out that getting a refund when you have overpaid is not as easy as it sounds, particularly when it's the government that has to pay you back.
One of the most significant cases that the justices have decided in recent years.
The Supreme Court dealing President Donald Trump a major blow.
The president does not have the authority to impose some of his sweeping global tariffs.
In April of last year, President Trump announced sweeping tariffs on imports from some 90 countries.
A historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs,
which hit businesses throughout the U.S. that had to pay the tariffs to bring in parts and goods. Victor Schwartz's VOS Selections is one of those businesses. What did the tariffs do to your business?
Well, it's terribly impactful. Out of the blue, we lost 15% of our cash flow. For any business, but certainly for a small business, that was terribly impactful. We had to make some quick decisions. One thing we had to look at is where could we raise prices to cover the tariffs? How much could we raise prices on which products? I tell you, we did not even begin to cover the tariff impact in terms of our price increases. So there was that. What kind of inventory we could jettison, because we had to come up with all this capital. Where's that going to come from? I don't have access to the credit markets, you know. So where are we going to come up with that money? Well, we got to sell product off. And even worse is, think about it, it wasn't just about VOS Selections. Everybody was in the same boat in my industry. So if everyone's trying to offload product, you've got to, a race to the bottom. I think we went through 4 different massive price changes over the course of the year. It was kind of head spinning. What was coming next? When was it coming? Not an easy situation, not a good place to be. And then the cherry on top is the fact that people are drinking less alcohol. So the wine and spirits industry is contracting all over the world. So nobody was happy.
We first met Schwartz exactly a year ago, just after he filed the original lawsuit in the U.S. Court of International Trade that challenged Trump's tariffs.
It's been a mess. It was 20%, then it was 10%, then they threatened 50%. In our industry, end of the day, we might make 5% as a net profit, 5 to 10%. So obviously, we can't afford 10%. We can't afford 20%, but 20% is really egregious.
Shortly after we last spoke, the Trump administration took Schwartz's case all the way to the Supreme Court. Earlier this year, it issued its ruling. So, Victor, a lot has happened since last we talked. You brought the case, you went to the Supreme Court, and you won.
We won.
But victory is a little more complicated than that. In the time that the tariffs were in effect, the Trump administration had collected $166 billion from more than 330,000 businesses, including big corporations like Walmart and Ford, but also many more small businesses selling anything from wine to women's bicycles, businesses that may not have the resources of large publicly traded companies.
We just want the Constitution to serve all Americans, and so we thought, why not us file this case? And nobody else was stepping up. Big businesses who have all the resources could have done it.
Sarah Albrecht is chairman and CEO of the Liberty Justice Center, which has been litigating on behalf of a handful of small businesses, including VOS Selections, that want their money back.
I think we had a strong case. I had hoped we'd win, but I knew the biggest battle was going to be after we left the courtroom and refunding the money to the thousands of small businesses across this country that basically had to hand over their entire working capital to the government while they sorted out this case.
So what did in fact happen? What was the process after it was remanded back down by the court?
We had to go back down to the Court of International Trade and kind of sort out how the process was going to go. And luckily, the Court of International Trade is a very specialized court that deals with exactly this type of situation. So they assigned us to a great judge, and we worked kind of a 3-way process between CBP, the government, and ourselves, and kind of came up with a game plan on how this was going to go. The judge was very much directing the process, and the government and CBP, I have to say, went along and did a good job kind of facilitating the largest refund in history. I mean, it was $166 billion. And just for a sense of what that means, CBP last year processed 338,000 entries. The IEEPA tariffs were going to involve processing 53 million entries. So they had to build out an entirely new system and portal to make it easy, because the last thing we wanted is small businesses to have to spend more time filing and doing paperwork and waiting for the government to give them the money that was rightfully theirs.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection has rolled out a 3-phase plan to return all that money. But as Albrecht expected, refunding tariffs is easier said than done. 5 months after the Supreme Court's rejection of IEEPA tariffs, the administration has returned only $71 billion of the $166 billion it collected. And now the Supreme Court has ruled, and there's a fair amount of money, according to press accounts, that has been refunded of those tariffs. How much of that have you realized?
None.
Well, how does that work?
It's pretty frustrating, actually. So I have to contact my vendor, who is in turn waiting for a refund from the shipping company, so that I can still pass through that refund to my customer as well. It's just really a big mess all the way around.
Alison Budvarzen is the COO of Out of the Box Manufacturing, a contract manufacturer of electronic devices that imports components from all around the world. Like many other small businesses, it is still waiting for its refund.
We get tariffs charged on raw materials that we use in our manufacturing process for machinery, as well as the component parts that we use to put circuit boards together. So we're actually getting hit from multiple angles.
Who pays the tariffs for you?
So it is a series of one person passing the cost down to another. Ultimately, my end customer is paying for the tariff. I purchase a part from my vendor, they pass the tariff along to me, and I pass it along to my customer.
Out-of-the-box manufacturing is only one of many small businesses that use third-party shipping vendors like DHL and FedEx. Those vendors will receive refunds first before the money gets to the small business owners who ultimately paid the tariffs.
So the way it's set up, since they paid the IEEPA tariffs initially, then the refunds went to them as the importer of record on behalf of the plaintiffs and other small businesses. And so the refunds will flow to those third-party vendors, and then a second refund process from the vendors back to their ultimate clients and customers. And hopefully that is also a speedy process. We are just starting to enter that phase because the third-party vendors are just starting to get their refunds, and then they have to pass it on.
And even as some refunds begin to flow, the legal battle is not yet over. The cases you brought were specifically about the so-called IEEPA tariffs imposed under that statute, and the court said, no, you can't do that. The Trump administration pretty much immediately said, okay, fine, we have some other statutes we'd like to use. Where does that stand?
Yeah, literally 5 hours after we won, they announced the Section 122 tariffs. That was a tariff statute that also had never been used. Those tariffs started on February 24th. They will end on July 24th. So we filed a lawsuit against those illegal tariffs as well, and that was heard at the Court of International Trade. We won that lawsuit. The government appealed, and we're still waiting for our court date on the appeal. When the tariffs stop, that appeal will continue because we need to get that money back to not only our plaintiffs, but to every business who had to pay the Section 122 tariffs, which we believe were also illegally.
Albrecht and her team of lawyers say they will not stop until every small business gets its refund. But even if and when that happens, it doesn't mean that things will be restored to where they were before the tariffs were imposed. Business owners like Schwartz and Budvarzen say much of the damage has already been done, with unintended consequences that money alone cannot erase. What about now, going forward, putting aside for the moment what's already been paid? Has your business largely returned to where it was before the tariffs?
I want to say it's different. So prior to tariffs and prior to the expiration of R&D tax credits, we did a fair amount of work in R&D. That went away. I believe that the tariffs had the effect of slowing down the pace of innovation because there was so much waiting and unpredictability in components. So that really slowed that process down. The tariffs are not doing anything to move the supply chain in the way that they are intended to move the supply chain. The reason is that the tariffs simply aren't high enough to make it painful enough for behaviors to change. I'm not advocating for higher tariffs. What I would advocate for instead is predictability, stability, and then support to regrow those industries within the United States so that we're treating this problem with a carrot rather than a stick.
As a business person, I have to work here every single day in the market. I can't be waiting for things to happen through the courts, et cetera. And it's unfortunate. It has really contracted the market. It's something I said a year ago. I think I said it to you, and it's all come true. The market has contracted.